Thank you, Jesse. To say that I'm honored to be here is an understatement. To say that this is a very exciting evening and the launch of an exciting program wedding the most modern of technologies, the most ancient hallowed of texts, is also an understatement. I will make one request of everybody. Once you've signed up, and at the bottom of the source sheets, you can see the website, TanakhStudy.com, please turn your phones off, so that we can keep our entire focus on what we're going to study together. There's only one book in Tanakh that you can begin at the beginning, and that is Sefer Bereshit. You cannot hope to understand Sefer Shemot without studying Sefer Bereshit. Vayikra makes very little sense without the end of Sefer Shemot. Devarim, no way we can understand what's going on without Sefer Shemot and Bamidbar at the very least. In very much the same spirit, it is irresponsible, pedagogically unsound, very frustrating to open up the beginning of Sefer Yehoshua without having some background. So what I'd like to do over the course of the next 45 minutes or so, try to provide proper background for the study of Sefer Yehoshua, with a quick introduction to Sifrei Neviim in general, the Sifrei Neviim Rishonim, as they're commonly called, the historic Neviim, more specifically, and then down to Sefer Yehoshua. I want to pose a question that, if we don't come up with a satisfactory answer, we have to disassemble everything. And the question is, Nevi'im lamalan. Why do we have Nevi'im? I don't mean why did we ever have the institution of people speaking in Hashem's name and telling us what Hashem wants? But why is this book so thick? After all, as Am Yisrael, we have the basic way of life that we're commanded to live in Chamisha Chumshei Torah. What do the Nevi'im add for us? If it's merely history, then one could argue that Yehoshua through Malachim, perhaps Ezra and Nehemiah would be enough. And is really that what it's all about? Just the history? So I'd like to suggest, as a general approach, that we study in Chamisha Chumshei Torah, and specifically in parts of Shemot, all of Vayikra, parts of Bamidbar, and most of the Dvarim, which are devoted to the Chukim and Mishpatim, to the laws which form the framework of our life, create for us boundaries, red lines, if you will. Those laws that guide us, that restrict us, that move us, and by which we express our relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to each other, to family, to community, to Eretz Yisrael, and to Klal Yisrael. There are many, and I doubt there are any of them in this room, but there are many who see that as the goal. The goal is to live within that framework. However, when we stood at the foot of Har Sinai, HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not say, V'atem tiyu li mamlechet shamranim, v'goy chuki, a kingdom of people who keep the laws. He called us a mamlechet kohanim v'goy kadosh, which basically translates into the laws being the basic framework within which we live our lives, and within that we have to achieve Kedusha. Within that framework, we are obligated to reach further. Essentially, to do that which is Hatov HaYashar Be'enei Hashem, that which HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us. How do we know that which HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us? and we open up Sefer Neviim, and we learn. We see that which Am Yisrael did historically, which may or may not have been within those lines, and we see how HaKadosh Baruch Hu responded. We hear the cries of Yeshayahu, the soothing words at times of Yirmiyahu, the threats of Yechezkel, Amos's words to the aristocracy in Shomron, Malachi's rebuke of the Kohanim. And we understand that within the law, there is a call for us to be great. That within the framework of the Chukim u'Mishpatim, there is a call to Kedoshim Tihiyu. And we get at least the very basic framework within which we can aspire to that Kedusha. It would be both wrong and misleading to suggest that that is the sum total of our motivation in studying Neviim. Besides the pure elegance of the language, the great illuminating effect of studying the Nevi'im on our understanding our own history and the times, there is so much more to be mined from the study of the Nevi'im. But at very least, that's a start. If one were to look into the Torah alone and say, what should I be doing every Shabbat? And the answer would be, Lo taseh melacha. Al yetzei ish mimekomo. Sit and don't do anything. That's all I would have. Make sure not to collect wood in Sefer Bamidbar. Get you killed. But I open up Sefer Yeshayahu and I see something very different. I see that that vacuum created by not doing malacha on Shabbat is now filled with Im tashiv mi Shabbat raglacha asot chafatzacha b'yom kodshi v'karata la Shabbat oneg l'kdosh Adonai mechubad. Suddenly I find out how I'm supposed to fill that space. And there's one of many examples. In that same parak, in Yeshayahu, which we will read 2 weeks from this morning, as the Haftarah on Yom Kippurim. If I were to look at the structure of a fast day, I don't think it's all about avoidance. Not eating, not drinking, perhaps in a biblical motif wearing sackcloth and ashes, bending my head over, halachof ke'agmon rosho. And I would think that's it. And what does Yeshayahu say? Halazet tikrat tzom? You think that's a fast? You want to know what a fast day is? Find somebody who's hungry and feed them. Find somebody who's in trouble and help them out. Take care of your own people. Mimsacha lo titalem. That's a Yom Ratzon. Yeshayahu is not telling us not to fast. Nobody should read that Haftarah and go out and have lunch on Yom Kippurim. One should also not feel that I've done enough because I live by the law. And so opening up Sefer Nevi'im tells us what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us. I have a friend, a teacher, who has a little sign on his desk. The sign's in Yiddish. So I know there's other blocks on Ocean Parkway this would not need translation. 3 big words. Vos zogt Gott. Ma omer Hashem. What does God say? And I said, whenever he was challenged with a question where there is no obvious answer in the halakha, and when perhaps we do not have direction from the Nevi'im or the Chachamim, somebody who has studied Torah has internalized the values enough to know very honestly was zog gat, to understand very honestly what it is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to do in that situation. And ultimately, Lev Yodea Marat Nafsho, we understand when we've made a decision, when we've opted for the value that brings us closer to Hashem and closer to making a Kiddush Hashem in this world, and when we haven't. Much of what I've described is what's found in the section that we refer to as Neviim Achronim. Neviim Achronim is a strange title. But the first 4 books of the Neviim that we have, with which we are opening tonight, are chiefly history. And why is it important for us to learn history? Well, it's not history. It's Divrei Hayamim L'Am Yisrael. Because any history of the Jewish people is not just history. Anything that happens to Am Yisrael, anything that we read about in history books that happens to Am Yisrael is part of a love relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. 3 beautiful young boys getting kidnapped, and all of Am Yisrael coming together in tefillah. And then that terrible day, June 30th, when we all found out what we all suspected the whole time, and all of Am Yisrael weeping together. The history of Am Yisrael is the history of a relationship between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we read that in the Nevi'im. Not to give anything away, and this is a spoiler alert, but sometime very soon, a fellow named Achan is going to come along. And Achan is going to take from the forbidden spoils of Yericho. And the results will be devastating. Teaching us very powerful lessons about arvut and about how we're responsible for each other. And how one person's crime can bring a whole people down. There are tremendous lessons to be mined from each passage and each sugya and each parasha in the Nevi'im. So without further ado, let's get started. When Jesse approached me a number of weeks ago, his first request was coming from the back end of Tanakh. In many Tanachim, including this Korean Tanakh that I have, the last book in Tanakh is a book called Divrei Hayamim. Divrei Hayamim is a very difficult book. I'll be honest with you, I've never studied it properly. Thanks to Jesse, now I have to. Because I'll be teaching it, and I'm honored to be teaching it as part of Tanakh study this year. So we're going to begin our study from the back of Tanakh, from Divrei Hayamim. Take a look at source 2. Divrei Hayamim, which is partially devoted in its beginning to a genealogy of the various Shvatim, for the most part bringing us up to David's time. In the section about Shevet Ephraim, we have the following. Uvnei Ephraim shutalach, uvarad beno, v'tachat beno, v'alada beno, v'tachat beno, and then there's a whole series of generations. And at the end of that list, we have a fellow named Nun. Not Nun, but Nun. Nun beno, Yehoshua beno. And that's the end of Bnei Ephraim. And what is startling for all of us, who are students of Tanakh, even just students of Chumash, is to think that somebody as heroic, somebody as central to our story, as Yehoshua Bin Nun or Bin Nun, is the end of a line. Did Yehoshua marry? Did Yehoshua have children? We don't know. We don't know because we're not told. But the text's silence here speaks volumes. And we have to figure out why it is that Yehoshua is presented as the end of a line. Because in reality, Yehoshua also appears out of nowhere, much as he fades to nowhere. You know, we have characters in Tanakh that come out of nowhere and play critical roles. First example that comes to mind certainly is Avraham. Where did Avraham come from? I know Ur Kasdim, Haran, Machloket, Rashi, Ramban, I understand. But where did Avraham come from? There's a problem that was so difficult that we have many midrashim trying to explain where he came from, why he was selected. Avraham and the Kivshan Ha'esh, Nimrod, these stories are all an attempt to understand why Avraham. Even a character like Yitro plays a secondary role, comes out of nowhere. But they don't disappear. Avraham does not disappear. Avraham is buried in Marat HaMachpelah, and Yitzchak and Esav are right there. Yitzchak and Ishmael are right there when he's buried. Next to Sarah, his wife. And we have characters that we watch them grow up. We watch Yitzchak grow up. We watch Yaakov grow up. We certainly watch Yosef grow up. We even watch Moshe Rabbenu grow up. But to have a character so central as Yehoshua, we're given no information of where he comes from except Shevet Ephraim and his father's name. And then he disappears. It's a mystery. Let's meet him for the first time. Vayavo Amalek, passage 3. Vayavo Amalek vayalachem Yisrael b'Refidim. Am Yisrael has crossed Yam Suf, has gone through the Midbar, we're now getting Man. We've just had our second water crisis, or if you count Yam Suf, perhaps the third. If you count the Nile, it could be number 4. Vayomer Moshe el Yehoshua. Who? No information, no background. This is where he shows up. Bachar lanu anashim etzei lachem b'Amalek, etc. We're all familiar with the passage. Moshe directs Yehoshua to put together an army and go fight against Amalek. Moshe, Aaron, V'chur go to the top of the mountain. Yehoshua and his men below fight. And the result of the battle is, of course, a draw. We are not defeated, Baruch Hashem. After all, we're here tonight. But on the other hand, Amalek is not defeated, hence, Timchat Zech Amalek. There's still Amalek to destroy. But Yehoshua comes out of nowhere. And Yehoshua is later presented both in several passages in Sefer Shemot and in a critical passage in Sefer Bamidbar as a loyal student, a loyal disciple, and perhaps the best word, a loyal lieutenant of Moshe Rabbenu. On Har Sinai, when Moshe comes down, hearing the call of the Egel celebration, if you will, and Yehoshua is partway up the mountain, Kol anot b'milchama, kol anot b'machaneh. But after that quasi-tragic scene where Moshe Rabbenu wants to quit, after the many complaints in Parshat Bahalotcha that leads to the Slav, and Hashem commands him to bring 70 men, and they all have prophecy. And after that episode, Vayisharu Shnei Anashim B'Machaneh, passage 4. Shem ha'echad Eldad v'shem ha'sheni Meidad v'tanach aleim haruach v'ema ba'ketuvim, itself an enigmatic passage. V'lo yatzu ha'oela v'yitnabu b'machaneh. Eldad and Meidad continue to have prophecy in the camp after it's supposed to be over. Vayarotz hanar, some kid comes running. Vayaged l'Moshe vayomar. Eldad and Meidad mitnabim b'machaneh. He reports to Moshe. Vayan Yehoshua Bin Nun misharet Moshe mi bechurav vayomar. And here we're introduced to Yehoshua. And by the way, this is the first time we actually hear Yehoshua Bin Nun. And who is he? Mi bechurav. He's one of Moshe's select. One of them. But critically, what's he called here for the first time? Misharet Moshe. Moshe's ministering servant. And what's his response to Moshe? Adoni Moshe Kala'im. Lock him up. Eldad and Meidad should be imprisoned. Moshe gives his student a very quick lesson. You're jealous on my behalf? Because we have other Neviim competing with my Nevuah? Because other Neviim were given a selected slot, and these two went past their slot of Nevuah? Umi yitain, kol am Adonai Neviim, ki yitain Adonai trucho alehem. Mi yitain, halavai, I wish that the entire nation would be Neviim. This is what I wanted at Har Sinai, for everyone to stand there and not send me ahead. If Hashem puts His Spirit on everyone, that's great. Don't be jealous for me. This is the wrong attitude. And we will find that Yehoshua is a very, very quick study. We are formally introduced to Yehoshua, finally, after all this time, in what I think we could safely say is the critical episode of his life as a disciple of Moshe. That is the episode that we commonly refer to, and I believe it's a misnomer, as the story of the Meraglim. I don't want to say too much about it because it sounds like that'll be the next shiur. But in that particular story of the 12 scouts that are sent, we're introduced to them by tribe. Ve'ela shmotam, take a look in source 5, pasuk Dalet. Ve'ela shmotam, l'matei Ruvain Shamuel ben Zakur, l'matei Shimon Shavat ben Chori, l'matei Yehuda Kalev ben Yefuneh, you can all cheer right now, l'matei Yisachar Yigal ben Yosef, l'matei Ephraim, what's his name? Yehoshua Bin Nun. I never heard of Yehoshua Bin Nun. Well, that's all right, I didn't hear about these other guys either. So that's fine. So there's some guy with a similar name, Yehoshua Bin Nun. Maybe he's Yoshua's brother. I look at the end of this particular passage. Eila shemot anashim asher shalach Moshe latur ta'aretz. Vayikra Moshe leHoshea bin Nun Yehoshua. Aha, now I'm going to connect the dots. This Hoshea bin Nun gets named Yehoshua by Moshe. So now the Yehoshua that I met back in Shemot fighting Amalek, the Yehoshua that was atop Har Sinai during the Maaseh HaEgel, the Yehoshua who tried to get Moshe to lock up Eldad Medad is none other than Hoshea bin Nun, the scout. Why is this note here? Why isn't this note back in Shemot? And why did Moshe change his name? Moshe has a nice name. We have a Navi by that name. We also have a Melech Yisrael by that name, but we'll ignore that. Moshe ben Baby, not bad. What's wrong with it? So what's the famous comment of Rashi here? Why did Moshe change his name to Yehoshua? Ya Yoshiacha me'atzat miraglim. In other words, Moshe is sending Yehoshua with the other fellows. Hoshea with the other fellows. What does Moshe know is going to happen? The other fellows are going to collude to lie. And he's concerned that his student Yehoshua will be taken in by that. So he gives him a special tefillah, Ya Yoshiacha mi'atzat miraglim, Hashem should save you, and changes the name. Hoshea adds God's name, Ya Yehoshea, Yehoshua. Very nice. Do we see any problems with that particular midrash that Rashi quotes? So I'll suggest them to you. If Moshe already knows that some or most of these miraglim, as we like to call them, are going to collude and lie, a big question, why did he send them? Or he could have done better, he could have sent them and then moved the camp with no forwarding address. It's another possibility. You know, without an anan, it's hard. Why does he send them if that's the case? And if he's afraid that Yehoshua is going to be taken in, send somebody else. So the Rashbam here says what I believe is the closest to Peshuto Shel Mikra. It will help us in our understanding of who Yehoshua is and actually in our understanding of Sefer Yehoshua. It says as follows. It is the custom, and we see it in Tanakh, that when a person joins a court as a disciple or member of the court, they are given a new name by the king. Where do we have examples of that in Tanakh? Let's start before Daniel. Yosef. What happens when Yosef joins the Egyptian court? He gets a good Egyptian name, Safnat Paneach, which means, by the way, the God has said he shall live. That's what it means in Egyptian. Safnat Paneach. Daniel is given the name Belteshazzar. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah are given Shadrach, Meshach, Shadrach, Abednego. I know more from the gospel song. It's not an unusual thing. As a matter of fact, we need go no further than Moshe Rabbenu, who I promise you, his name is not Moshe. I don't know what his name is. You don't know what his name is. Nobody knows what his name is. One thing I can guarantee, it's not Moshe. When did he get the name Moshe? Side point. When did he get the name Moshe? At what point? When what? When Bat Paro did what? Actually, take a look at it again. You'll see not. Bat Paro pulled him out of the water and said, oh, a kid. Miriam says, hey, you want me to? Yeah, okay, go ahead. And a few years later, when the mother, who, by the way, this is the best in your face, the mother of the Jewish kid has been nursing her own child and paid by Paro to do so. When she finally hands this child over for adoption to Bat Paro, then Bat Paro says, Vatikra Shmo Moshe, which, by the way, in Egyptian just means son. Meses. So what was he called before that? What do you think? When he was born, for the first 3 months, they said, oh, little child? And what about for the next few years while his mother's nursing him? Remember, he was nonstop in his parents' home except for one afternoon on the river. Better than Huck Finn. So what did they call him? Chazal are convinced that he had another name. They just don't know what it is, so there's about 15 suggestions. Tov, Tuvia, Avigdor, Avisocha, Yekutiel, Chever. Fine. Based on Psukim in Divrei Hayamim. That's a plug. But Moshe Rabbenu himself got a new court name. Moshe. Which means that this Hoshea, which is what name you'll find him if you check Misrad HaPnim under Shevet Ephraim. If you look in the registry, the genealogy of Shevet Ephraim, not the one we have in Divrei Hayamim from much later. But if at the time of the Torah you check Shevet Ephraim's birth list, you'll find the kid Hoshea. You won't find any Yehoshua. So the text says, oh yeah, that's Yehoshua. That's his court name. Okay, the Rashbam. We still haven't seen the lesson that he learned. Very interesting thing. If you take a look at it, there are two heroes in this story. The story of the quote-unquote Miragelim. Who are they? Yehoshua and Kalev. Which one of them was vocal in his opposition to the other 10? Kalev. Which one of them took a stand? Kalev. Which one of them does Hashem identify as having Ruach Acheret Imo? Kalev. And yet he's not the one who gets chosen to be the next leader. Remember what Moshe Rabbenu said to Yehoshua? Hamkaneh Atali. He was teaching Yehoshua a very powerful lesson about leadership. And Yehoshua evidently understood this lesson. Because when Kalev speaks up and goes against the people and stands on one side against everyone and earns the right to enter the land and to inherit Kiryat Arbahi Chevron, by standing up against everyone, he also demonstrates his essential lack of fitness as a leader. When Yehoshua understands that right now they won't be able to listen, and he sits quietly and tears his clothes and says, Tovah ha'aretz mi'od mi'od, he demonstrates that he understands that part of what animates proper leadership is understanding that you do not lead, you lead a people. You do not lead without the people. And unless you can interact properly with the people, which means knowing the right time to say the right thing that will be heard, you can't lead. And so we turn to passage 6. And a remarkable passage, a remarkable pasuk. In the first part of passage 6, Hashem says to Moshe, it's your time. Come on up to Har Avarim and die. If I were to ask you right now, what is the single most popular pasuk in all of Chumash, what would your answer be? Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. There's more of that than anything else, by a long shot. Look at pasuk Tedvav. Vaydaber Moshe el Adonai lemor. Chutzpah. Moshe is commanding Hashem. And what does he say to him? Yifkod Adonai Elohei Aruchot L'chol Basar Ishal Haidah. You must appoint someone as a leader. I'm not going to die. I won't agree to die until you appoint someone to take over for me. But what does he call Hashem here? Elohei Aruchot, the God of the spirits. There's only one other time that he calls him that. And where is that? In the story of Korach. Korach. Elohei Aruchot L'chol Basar Ish Echad Yachtav HaKol Haidah Tiktsof. Elohei Aruchot, God who understands everybody's internal intentions and thoughts. So why does he say it here? Because Moshe says, I need someone to take over for me who knows how to deal with over 1 million different people, with 13 different tribes, with old people and young people and men and women, tribes that are going to inherit on this side and on that side. I need someone who can work with all of them. And what does Hashem answer him? Kach lecha et Yehoshua Bin Nun ish asher ruach bo. And what does Rashi HaKadosh say here? Ish asher ruach bo? Someone who can deal with each person in their own way. Shiodea lahalech neged rucho shel kol echad ve'echad. Someone who knows how to deal with this person that way and that person the other way, and can talk to Shiftei Gad and Reuven one way, and Shevet Menashe another way, and Benot Tzlofchad a third way. He knows that there is no leadership without leading real people. And it's a lesson that he learned from you, Moshe. And now you take him as the one that you're going to pass on the mantle of leadership to. And you see in passages 7 and 8 that Yehoshua is indeed the one who is directed and transitioned into leadership. You will be the one to lead the division of the land. You will be the one to oversee the condition that Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven agreed to. And now in Sefer Devarim, we read this morning, Vayikra Moshe leYehoshua, passage 9, Vayomer elav l'nechol Yisrael, Chazak ve'amatz. What does Moshe say to Yehoshua? Chazak ve'amatz. Be strong, be courageous. This is a passage that a phrase that we have seen since Parashat Devarim, all through Sefer Devarim. Chazak ve'amatz. Ki ata tavo or tavi et ha'am hazeh la'aretz asher nishba Adonai la'avotam la'tet lahem ata tanchilena otam. You're going to bring them to this land, and you're going to bequeath it to them. And it works. But it works with a very clear proviso. At the very end of the Torah, as we hear about Moshe's passing, Yehoshua Bin Nun, Malei Ruach Chochma, Ki Samach Moshe et Yadav Alav. What makes Yehoshua wise? What makes Yehoshua a great leader? What makes Yehoshua the one who is the best fit to lead Bnei Yisrael now? Ki samach Moshe yadav alav. Moshe gave his energy, gave his power, gave his teaching to Yehoshua. Yehoshua is great because he is Mesharet Moshe. Yehoshua is not great because of something he did on his own. He's great because of his relationship to his Rebbe. Vaya'asu kasher tziva Adonai et Moshe. Bnei Yisrael obey Yehoshua, and they obey him as they obeyed Moshe. Notice, Yehoshua does not get independent credit as a leader. Yehoshua does not have independent status as a leader. But Ka'asher Hasu, Ka'asher Tziva Hashem et Moshe, and we will find out they end up following as they did Moshe. And as if to make this point with utter clarity, as soon as we find out that Yehoshua successfully transitions into leadership, the very next pasuk begins the eulogy for Moshe, which slaps that leadership down and says, "V'lo kam navi od b'Yisrael k'Moshe." Yehoshua is a follower of Moshe. Yehoshua takes the place of Moshe, but Yehoshua can never be Moshe. V'lo kam navi od b'Yisrael k'Moshe. And what makes Moshe so special? Asher yida'o Adonai panim al panim. God spoke to him face to face. Hashem's own words to Miriam and Aharon back in Bamidbar. Lo chen avdi Moshe. Moshe is different than all the Neviim. And as we hear about Yehoshua's successful ascendance to leadership, we also hear about its limits and the strings that are attached to it. It is only successful because he is Misharet Moshe. So before opening our study of Yehoshua, with which we'll conclude, the last passage, I want to ask you, what do you think is the foremost concern that Yehoshua has during the Shloshim for Moshe Rabbenu? Moshe is gone. We have a waiting period before we're ready to move on because we must mourn for Moshe. But then it all starts. Then I take over. Then I lead across the Ardennes. Then I lead into battle. Then I help divide the land. Then I establish 1 or 12 or 13 Malchuyot. What's the foremost concern on my mind? It should be fairly obvious. Everything we've done tonight, from Yehoshua Misharet Moshe, from Yehoshua being part of the court of Moshe, from Yeshua's entire power and leadership coming from the fact that Moshe put his hands on him, from the limitation of V'lo kam navi od b'Yisrael k'Moshe, the answer should be obvious. Yeshua's greatest concern walking into this stage of leadership, this new position of leadership, is, how could I ever fill my teacher's shoes? How could I possibly follow Moshe Rabbenu? How do you take over for the greatest leader in Jewish history? How do you take over for Navi, who Hashem spoke to face, which will never happen again? How do you do that? And the first pasuk in Sefer Yehoshua identifies this crisis. It is with great excitement and honor I feel like I'm cutting a ribbon. We begin the study of Neviim together. Vahi acharei mot Moshe eved Adonai. Vayomer Adonai Yehoshua Bin Nun misharet Moshe lemor. The contrast could not be clearer. Who is Moshe? Eved Hashem. Who is Yehoshua? Misharet Moshe. The grandest goal that Yehoshua could possibly strive for in the life that yet remains, because although we don't have his age at this point, we know he dies at the age of 110, the indications from the story with Kalev are that he's roughly in his 80s now. The greatest goal that he could strive for would be that when the next person takes over, he'd be taking over for Yehoshua Eved Hashem. How could he possibly do that? I don't want to give anything away, but take a peek at the end of Sefer Yehoshua and see for yourself. What does Hashem say to him? Moshe Avdi mate. Avdi. Listen to the intimacy there. Listen to the mourning there. Moshe Avdi mate. Ve'ata kum avor et hayarden hazeh ata v'chol am hazeh al haaretz asher anochi noten lahem libnei Yisrael. And it's as if Hashem is saying, okay, Moshe is gone. Okay, it's your turn. And here's what you got to go do. Don't linger. Move. And listen to the power he gives him, and listen carefully to the words. Kol makom asher tidroch kaf raglechem bo lachem netativ. Anywhere that your feet walk, I've given to you. Kasher dibarti al Moshe. Moshe's spirit hovers over Yeshua's career till the very end. It's comforting, but it's daunting. It's supportive, and yet it's threatening. It's supportive because I know that I am a Talmid Moshe, I'm Misharet Moshe. And it's daunting because I just can't live up to that. I can't live up to who Moshe is, and Moshe was. מהמדבר והלבנון הזה ועד הנהר הגדול נהר פרת, כל ארץ החיתים, ועד הים הגדול מבוא השמש יהיה גבולכם. And the boundaries are given. And now the promise. לא יתייצב איש לפניך כל ימי חייך. No one will stand up to you. I mean, your wars are going to be basically landslides, steamrolling. כאשר הייתי משה יהיה עמך, לא ארפך ולא אעזבך. כאשר הייתי עם Moshe. Again, I'm going to be with you, just like I was with Moshe. And that's a two-sided coin. What greater relief could you have going into battle than HaKadosh Baruch Hu saying, I'll be with you like I was with Moshe? And yet, what greater sense of malaise or unease could you have saying, I'm only earning this because of Moshe? Chazak v'yamatz. Have we heard those words before? When? Who said them? Moshe said them to Yehoshua. And there's something painfully beautiful here. The words that my teacher would say to me, my teacher's no longer here. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chvodo v'atzmo was saying it for him. My Rebbe would say Chazak v'yamatz. My Rebbe's gone. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says Chazak v'yamatz. Ki ata tanchil et ha'am hazeh et ha'aretz asher nishbati la'avotam lated lahem. Rak Chazak v'yamatz. Stronger. More of a push. Me'od lishmor la'asod k'chol ha'torah shetzivcha Moshe Avdi. And now, the line of succession and the line of command is made very clear. I commanded Moshe, and Moshe commanded you. Al tasur mimenu yaminu smol, man taskil b'chol asher telech. The Al tasur mimenu yaminu smol, of course, is a line that we're familiar with from Sefer Devarim, in the parasha of Beit Din HaGadol, we're told not to deviate from their words. And Yehoshua is told, you relate to the words of Moshe Rabbenu as everyone is commanded to relate to Divrei Beit Din HaGadol. You do not deviate to the right or to the left. You do exactly as he told you. L'man taskil b'chol asher telech. And taskil here should be understood as success. And the directive is, Lo yamush sefer HaTorah zeh mipicha v'yita bo yomam v'layla. You have to speak these words day and night. L'man tishmor la'asod kechol ha'katuv bo ki az tatzliach et rachacha v'yaz taskil. And there's a whole sequence, a causal relationship. Study this Torah all the time. Have it always be on your mouth. That will lead you to success, and then you'll be successful in the battle. Halot tziviticha chazak ve'ematz. One more time. Have I not told you? And tziviticha here is not in the sense of command, but as much charged you. I've given you the mandate of chazak ve'ematz. Al ta'arotz ve'al techat. Kimcha Adonai Elohecha b'chol asher telech. God is with you everywhere you go. Now let's roll back for a minute and let's think, when was the last time that HaKadosh Baruch Hu told us not to be afraid? It's a while ago. It's in Sefer Bamidbar. We have skirted Moab, we've skirted Ammon, we've skirted Edom, we haven't gone to battle with them. And there's some new people on the landscape there on the east bank that are between us and Eretz Canaan. Kingdom of Emori, led by a fellow named Sichon. So we say, can we go through? And Sichon says, no, they come out to war. And here HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, go to war. Al tiravi al tichat. Don't be afraid. Ki biyadcha nitatim. They're in your hands. I've given them to you. You're going to win. And when Og gets involved, same story. And now we understand that the words that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is using in his word, in speaking to Yehoshua about the Amei Canaan are the same exact words he used in giving Moshe support and comfort in his war against Sichon and against Og, which of course we know ended quite gloriously for us. And there's a double-edged sword happening here. On the one hand, Yehoshua is purely Misharet Moshe. And all of his power emanates from the fact that he is Misharet Moshe. Nothing that he earned on his own. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu keeps echoing the words that Moshe told him. But on the other hand, there's a glimmer of a greater picture winking here. Is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu also uses the same words he used when speaking with Moshe, with Yehoshua. He speaks to Yehoshua as he spoke to Moshe. So yes, you and I do have an independent relationship, Yehoshua. And I will speak to you as I spoke to Moshe. It won't be all derech Moshe. It'll also be directly from me. But you have to understand that your leadership is anchored in the fact that you are Misharet Moshe. What is going on here? Why is it that we don't hear of Yehoshua's background? The only thing we get is a little genealogical note that his name was Hoshea, got switched to Yehoshua. And we don't hear about any future for him. As I mentioned at the beginning, Sefer Neviim teaches much about what is between the lines of Chumash. The Neviim complete for us that which Chumash just sketches out. A successful leader, the leader that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants for Am Yisrael, is a leader who understands that his mandate is purely as a Misharet Moshe. And his legacy is what he gives to Am Yisrael. If you will, he has no past and he has no future. He has no parents and he has no children. He is one thing and one thing only. And that is the leader of Klal Yisrael. His success depends on his selflessness and his ability, as we saw before, to work lefi rucho shel kol echad ve'echad, to respond to everybody in their own way, to be able to meet the needs of the different components of the community. The greater that his self gets in, the greater that, if you will, his yichus gets in, who his ancestors were, and the greater that he works for his own lineage, the less he's able to devote himself fully to Klal Yisrael. It is no coincidence that we have seen in Tanakh and we've seen in Jewish history, including recent history, that among our most powerful and great leaders were people who were not successes as parents because they had to devote themselves entirely to leadership. Yehoshua is who he is because he's Misharet Moshe. He comes out of nowhere because his past is not the issue. The only issue that matters is his relationship to Moshe. The only name by which he know him is saved for one place is the name that Moshe gave him, not that his parents gave him. Much as Moshe's name is the name he was given in the court. And Yehoshua is buried in Timnat Serach and we never hear from him again. No kids, no family, no nothing. He disappears. And Yehoshua emerges from Tanakh as the single most successful leader in history. Not greatest necessarily, but successful. Read Sefer Yehoshua and you will see that he had one little speed bump and a near dead end. A little speed bump called Achan and a near dead end with Gad and Reuven and the Mizbeach. And that's it. An unbelievably successful career. I believe that the Tanakh, by drawing the lines that it is and by omitting what it does, is teaching us something about the desired leader that we need. Someone whose self takes a back seat to the Kehillah, and someone whose own interests, even family interests, are something that takes a back seat. This, of course, can create a tremendous conflict and become very challenging. But sometimes it is the greatest challenges and the greatest conflicts that lead to the greatest leadership. There is a pasuk in Tehillim, source 1 on your pages, that seems to be referring to a messianic figure. In Tehillim Ayin Bet, Parak Shlomo, which has many psukim which are messianic in nature, V'yerd miyam ad yam, min harav se'aretz, Yifrach b'yamav tzadik, etc. And towards the end, which is the end of the second book of Tehillim, Hishmo le'olam, lifnei shemesh yinon shemo. Who is Yinon? So the Gemara in Sanhedrin says Yinon is the name of Mashiach. They give about 5 different suggestions: Shiloh, Yinon. V'yitbaruchu vo kol goyim v'yashru. Everyone will be blessed by him, and all the nations will confirm his ascendancy. Sounds like Mashiach. Perhaps Yinon is indeed Yehoshua Bin Nun. I'm not the first one to make that suggestion on this pasuk, but perhaps this is what the pasuk is telling us. Is the person that's ultimately going to lead Am Yisrael to a place where all of the nations will confirm his position, and where all of Am Yisrael will be blessed by his leadership, is somebody who has devoted himself 100% to the leadership of Klal Yisrael and has taken his own self-interest out of the picture. In a time in which, l'tzarenu, we see leaders fall. Leaders fall due to conflicts between their own selfish interests and the very holy task that they've been given and the position of greatness that they've assumed. This is something that we can all pray for, to see a leader like Yehoshua, who will lead us past the dark days of this past summer. And now as we await a Chatimah Tovah and pray for a Chatimah Tovah, we will have a truly blessed year. We'll be energized by the wonderful study of Tanakh together as a community of people and a virtual community together around the world. And Mirza Hashem, we will make a great siyum on Neviim, B'vinyan Beit HaMikdash.